Please welcome to the stage Jamie Kastner, Clarence Epstein, and Willi Korte.
Thank you. Maybe I'll just quickly acknowledge, if I may, the presence of the film's producer, also Laura Baron-Kastner, at the back.
Well, thank you for this amazing and fascinating film and for coming to New York to talk about it with me. Maybe we could start by, Jamie, you're telling us how the project came about.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, it's quite thrilling to play here to, full house at Lincoln Center. So thank you very much for the invitation to us in the film. The film came about, as I said, I really knew very little about this before getting involved with this project. And a sort of old pal of mine in the journalism world named Sarah Angel had written a journalist and academic had written a fair bit about this story. She saw a previous film we did about a large-scale art fraud called There Are No Fakes, involving the work of an indigenous artist, Norval Morrisseau, or purportedly involving his work, and in which there's a lot of feuding in that film. She saw that film and said, "I have a story for you." And she pretty well told me the rough outline of this tale and how it evolved, and I said, "Yep, sounds like my kind of thing," and that's how I became aware of it.
And did you connect with Willi and Clarence right away?
Pretty well. Well, with Clarence first. Sarah made the introduction, and then we met and started talking, and eventually. One was put in touch with the legendary and fearsome Willi Korte, and and set about to the yes, indeed.
Just a research guy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But where did you steal that? What?
I have to schlep looted paintings with me. That's one of my jobs.
Well, that's show business. You know, you need a fallback profession, like my mother always told me.
And how did the story arc change along the way? Did you have a clear picture? I mean, there's so many twists and turns to the story. Did you envision that it would you would follow it over years, or how did it develop?
Honestly, it's a process that's born of this is my 10th film, so I have some sense that I'll come out with something. if I strongly feel that there's enough in a story that's worth pursuing, and I do like twists and turns, and I do like not obvious things, but I don't honestly know how I'm going to do it. I hope there's there's only one funder in the audience that I'm aware of, and she's already supported this. I should thank the Claims Conference also for their support for this. Now I can tell the truth. Well, the film was already done by then. But I don't really know. So I know, as we were discussing earlier, among the first interviews that we got in the can were with Mr. Pufendorf and the first mayor, Geisel, during the development period. I knew you had to have that side of the debate and in it to otherwise it would just be one-sided. And I knew it was going to be a complicated and potentially dry story, which I found very interesting, but how would you tell it in a film? I didn't really know. But I've had experience doing films where you mete out material that's happened in the past in a kind of dramatic way, kind of like a thriller or an interrogation. And so, I just sense that then the rest is trial and error. You're getting pieces, and you spend 6 months in editing with an excellent editor, Mike Hannon, and you knock your heads against the wall, and eventually, if you're lucky,
And Clarence, are there any updates you can give us, developments that have taken place since the end of the filming?
Well, numerous claims are pending, and we always have claims that are on the go. We were just out for a little bite before with a journalist, and when I was thinking about this film and the fact that we were talking about two paintings by the same artist that are covered in the film, I thought of another artist named Achenbach that we had two paintings of. One, which we are still disputing, that is a work that is very much of interest to Pufendorf, because I believe he still represents the client that has that painting. We don't know anymore. And the other painting is in this box right here. And maybe, Willi, you can tell us a little bit about the story of this Achenbach, because claims are constantly on the go and things happen quickly and things happen sometimes out of order, and that's the way the restitution world works.
Well, I'm always eager to engage the audience. This is from auction 392, which you saw in the film is the event at the Lempert's auction house, whereby the remaining inventory of the Stern Gallery was liquidated in a forced sale, a Jew auction. This little painting was lot number 1 in the auction, so I encourage you to go to your local art library, look for the Max Stern sales catalog, and you will find lot number 1, this lovely little Norwegian landscape by the Düsseldorf artist Andreas Achenbach. So that's in this box.
Where shall we start the bids?
Do I hear $1 million?
And have you shown the film in Germany, and what was the response?
The film has shown in Munich. It premiered at the Munich International Film Festival in the summer. And the response was engaged and tense, I would say. Mayor Geisel came, so that was an exciting surprise. And he stayed for the whole thing, and then after he posed for pictures with me and
Posed
Willi.
for pictures too, if I remember.
That'll be one for the mantle. And I said to him, "I hope you'll forgive me when you're chancellor." And he said, "Well, it's not your fault that people lied to you." And I honestly thought, he said it so blithely like that, I thought he was talking about himself for a moment. And then it occurred to me, no, that's probably not what he meant. Then we did a screening in Berlin in November, kind of concurrently with a lecture Willi was giving, but at a private cinema. And Herr Pufendorf came, and as did one of Herr Hanstein's daughters. And I was seated one person away from them with only one unsuspecting embassy employee as a buffer zone. And he huffed and puffed a certain amount throughout, and then at the end he pronounced the film as he stood up and left. He didn't stay for the Q&A. Maybe he's here. He said ein Machwerk. He pronounced it ein Machwerk, which I'm told is an arcane term meaning the piece of shit.
For which I could find, unpleasant translations.
A shoddy work, let's say, for a family audience.
I mean, the film.
But obviously, that's going on the poster.
The film is not balanced.
I beg to differ.
There were good people on both sides. That kind of argument.
Well, I would say the film is. I mean, I consider myself a journalist first. I was a print journalist, in the beginning of my career, and I bring that forth. I think everybody was given a fair chance to say his or her piece. I don't think. I think it was balanced actually in that regard. It's okay. Maybe putting "Springtime for Hitler" in there may have slightly revealed a certain sympathy on the part of the director, What actually, I guess that was the one definitely unbalanced part. What other film clip could I have put in? Something from Triumph of the Will or something? Anyway.
Well, the country continues to struggle with aspects of restitution going back to the Nazi period. And as we all know, the current political climate is not particularly helpful either, to put it mildly. The unfortunate thing about the art restitution aspect that it doesn't really have a statute of limitation attached to it. As you know, going back to the Washington Conference, we had a quarter of a century. Moral arguments were made. A historical obligation, was referred to. So there's a certain uneasiness about this going on and going on and going on, and many people are uncomfortable that now the generation of the grandchildren are making these claims. As I said in the movie, people should have come in the 50s and 60s and make these claims. Unfortunately, there wasn't much of a legal or political support network for that kind of approach. So particular museums think that, they acquired these works of art fair and square, that they have been taking good care of them, for many, many years now. And why are individuals now coming, ripping paintings off their wall with the argument that the painting belonged to their grandparents? And they themselves, the claimants, don't have any personal connection with the painting. And the painting just ends up in an auction house, and it's all about money. It's, as was said in the past, this is not about restitution and justice, this is about money. And that, prevents them from accepting what I say in the film. This is not about a painting, this is about people. This is about people behind, associate with a work of art. And the focus needs to be on people, not on art. And that, I think, makes people uncomfortable when they're confronted in the 21st century with something for which they're not personally responsible for, but for which they are confronted with the question, well, how do you respond today as you are associated with a work of art that is tainted to that painting's history and the people associated back then that were associated with this painting and who lost the painting? Some people, and you usually sense that quite quickly, are eager to respond and deal with it, and other people just feel that they're being attacked unfairly. And then it can get pretty ugly in the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, there are some extreme statements coming out of people's mouths, and it just goes from one extreme to the other, really. I guess I used to think there was a tension in art restitution cases between what's obviously ethically correct and what might be legally, have a legal precedent. But this really opened my eyes to the people who disagree on the ethical element. The moral obligation is not there.
I mean, I'll just throw in, as I said before the film, I was amazed to hear that this kind of stuff was still going on. I've been to Germany by now a number of times, and have some German friends, and it all with those people. Actually, it's a subject that's rarely, if ever, touched upon. Don't talk about the war, but life seems to have moved forward, and you assume you're vaguely aware that reparations have been made and so on. I was amazed in the research for this film to learn that in contemporary mainstream German papers, there were headlines such as, "They say Holocaust and mean money." And that was actually the working title, fond as I am of provocative titles, that was the working title of this film for a while. It was a speech given by a Berlin auctioneer, and then published as an op-ed in a major paper, and especially coming from Canada, where at the very least, paying lip service to cultural sensitivity is the law of the day. That such things are said out loud, that you could have panels deciding on this kind of thing without a Jew involved. I mean, if you can imagine in Canadian terms, just as a counterpoint, doing anything comparable without an Indigenous person involved in something that involved the restitution of Indigenous property, it's just unthinkable. So to say the tone deafness, to put it kindly, was amazing. But yes, to hear, and then when you start hearing, just as someone who doesn't have a stake in this in the same way as these gentlemen do, and doesn't have to be as diplomatic, not that anyone's ever accused you of that, actually. But when you start thinking about the kind of legalistic dissecting or arguing about angels on the heads of pins, like how much was the Jew suffering in the fall of 34 versus the spring of 35, and you're really going to go to bat over that when you know what the punchline is that's coming up, a few short years later. So yeah, it was a revelation to me too.
And in the film, you make an analogy about a car, a stolen car, and it's so vivid and it seems so clear. And I wonder if either of you think that there's something inherent in art, in these being works of art, that changes the equation.
On a number of levels, and we see that in all our lives with our personal possessions. For most people who acquired works, there was an emotional attachment to them. And so trying to make the equation with a car or with an object that you have less emotional attachment with confuses people. But at the end of the day, it's property. And property that is taken unlawfully is wrong. And in most cases, there are statutes of limitations for things like cars that are stolen or objects that are stolen within a certain period of time. But when you have a historic crime, it's a very different type of limitation that you have to build in to the rationale on why to return or why to compensate somebody for it. And educating people, whether they are the children of people that acquired these works in good faith or in bad faith, whether they're museums or whether they're flowing through auction houses that are challenging the provenance, becomes really our task, and particularly Willi's as the lead investigator, to educate and hopefully bring them to a point where they understand that there are losers on both sides of this discussion, and if we're going to both come out as winners, we're going to have to figure this out together. And so that becomes really the premise of moving it away from just a stolen object to something that has an emotional and visceral attachment on each side that needs to be somewhat walked through and somewhat compromised in terms of its future.
Well, and let's not forget, it's a permanent struggle for us to make sure that this does not disappear into history. I've been dealing with various aspects of the Nazi period my entire adult life, and I regularly feel and fear that the general public is losing interest. Being a child who was born in the country of the perpetrators, the son of a mother who was a victim of the perpetrators. We were told never again, we will never forget. And looking back at my life and looking around in the world, I'm not so sure that's working so well. And as far as my contribution is concerned, yes, I see the need to continue to make an effort so it will not be forgotten. And if the Stern project and the paintings in the Stern collection are a vehicle, and the Stern Foundation has been very supportive of that idea, to continue to remind people to tell the story, which again is not primarily the story of a painting, but the story of a person behind the painting. And I think we need to continue that, in particular, since the only eyewitnesses are in this box by now. The generation of the eyewitnesses is gone by now. So I feel an obligation, to continue to remind people to tell the story, and not only in a negative way, that this is limited to an individual as a victim of persecution. But as you can see in the film, all these people, made contributions as long as they were allowed to do so, until their lives were cut short. So that's what I personally strongly feel as the overall mission and task of the Max Stern Art Restitution Project.
And that's really wonderful and important. Is it unusual that the foundation is not a family foundation in terms of restitution cases?
Generally, yes. We are definitely unusual in our composition and our framework compared to other individuals, grandchildren, or heirs of families who've disappeared. So I think what makes us exceptional is having a structure of beneficiaries and heirs that are institutions. The one premise that we've built this strategy around is because the universities are around forever, that makes us perpetual plaintiffs. And to Willi's point, never again means we can be around to remind everybody about never again, as opposed to heirs that are mortal and will eventually, if their families don't have the means or the ability to carry on, the story will be lost by virtue of them being lost.
And I think the film can be a very important tool. What are your plans? What's next for the film?
We are talking to some distributors in different parts of the world about getting it out there on different platforms, and it is going to keep going to a number of festivals, a number of Jewish film festivals, and also some non-Jewish film festivals. My producer would think me remiss if I did not point out that this can be followed on the company's Instagram page at Cave 7 Productions. So yeah, we're gonna keep pushing to get it out there, and that's the plan.
That's great. Well, thank you all so much for coming
Thank you.
discussing the film.
Thanks, everybody.